one of the leading French directors, Olivier Assayas. Thank you very much for your time. Your recent movie revolves around one of the most notorious men, real-life Venezuelan terrorist, Carlos. What made you interested in this highly debatable and controversial media figure to the point where you decided to make a 5.5-hour film about him?
Frankly, I had, I had no idea I would ever make a movie like Carlos. It's unlike anything I've done before. And somehow I had a sense that the story of Carlos allowed me to make a movie about, not exactly my generation, but like the 70s and 80s generation in Europe, meaning the history of West European leftism. Carlos is both exceptional. He had an exceptional fate, and he had an extraordinarily adventurous life, but then at the same time he's representative of what leftists of that time were about, and he went all the way when most of them stopped halfway or something like that. So it's the scope of the film, the possibility of dealing with modern history, modern politics. It made it very exciting to me, and it kind of grew out of control.
You were quoted as saying that Carlos built himself like a rock star, but the problem is, you said, you cannot really be a terrorist and a star at the same time. What makes you think so?
Terrorists are underground creatures. You can't be a political activist and at the same time be famous, be some kind, be in the media the way Carlos has been in the media. It certainly does limit your potential. What is strange and interesting about Carlos is how he became some kind of star for the media, because he shot 3 cops in Paris, because he was a Latin American radical who had studied in Moscow, who became an ally of the Palestinian radicals, who was moving in leftist circle in Paris and London. So he had this weird cosmopolitan thing about him, and it just gave a notion that he was at the center of some kind of internationalist revolutionary movement. But of course, once he became this kind of this Carlos creature, this Carlos monster in the media, he couldn't travel around that much. He couldn't he couldn't be very much on the field because people knew him. So it was both his success and his downfall.
Along with his 2 brothers, Ilyich Ramirez Sanchez got his first name from Soviet communist leader Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. He spent some time in the Soviet Union studying at the People's Friendship University in Moscow. How important was this Soviet period for him?
It's debated, and it's really hard to say, and I've been extremely careful in the film in my handling of that aspect of Carlos, because he grew up in a Marxist family in Venezuela. His parents sent him to the Lumumba University in Moscow. That's where he studied, and then he was thrown out he was expelled from the university for bad behavior or whatever. So, and then he resurfaces, just being, with a gun in his hand in Jordan, at the side of the Palestinians from the PFLP. The PFLP was led by Wadi Haddad, who was himself a KGB agent. So, what exactly are the KGB connections of Carlos? It's a very difficult subject. There's basically no proof. There's an actual connection, but there's a feeling, there's a sense around Carlos that he has connection, support in Russia, because like in the 80s he moves around extremely freely between East Germany, Hungary, Yugoslavia, Romania. I doubt he could have done that if the Soviet Union was not supportive of whatever he was doing.
60-year-old Carlos, who is currently serving a life sentence in a French prison, was quoted as saying he is not satisfied with your film. Do you care about his negative reaction at all?
I did not imagine he would be satisfied. You can't be satisfied, you know. I'm sure it's a strange feeling, you know, but it's your fate. I mean, if you become part of modern history, somehow you become part of everybody's experience. You become a public figure. So obviously, the fate of public figures is that their lives are going to be interpreted. He has been against the film project from the start. And he tried to stop the film from being made. He tried to have access to the first cut of the film. He has tried really hard to have some kind of control on the film, which was of course absolutely impossible. So he's made a lot of comment in the media, exposing his dissatisfaction. But I'm sure once he has seen the film, he will have more to say. And I doubt he will be happy, but I think he might be also, disturbed by the closeness of some of the images to his experience.
Given your film is not a documentary, how much of it is actually fact and what is fiction?
The basics are fact. It's fact as much as possible, and then you have to turn it into fiction. You know, it's in terms of the screenplay. The screenplay is extremely factual, and it's very it's checked and double checked. Some of it, it's impossible to have the final word on. You know, there's some, there are some state archives that have not been opened, and there's gray areas, to put it that way. So of course, when it's gray areas, you have to make choices, and you end up choosing the most believable option. But a lot is, there's a lot. There has been there are memoirs written, witnesses, first-hand witnesses often. So I've tried to stick as close as I could.
Roman Polanski was once quoted as saying that as a director, you have to show violence as it is, realistically, to make an impact on people. Otherwise, your film will just be useless. How did you manage to find a balance making a film about the roots of terrorism?
There are a few action scenes in the film, and they are all as accurate as possible. I think it's not. I'm not a specialist in shooting action scenes. I haven't done it that much, but I've done it a few times. But in the case of Carlos, I kind of it's very, very factual. When we filmed like the assault on the OPEC offices. We had the floor plan of the offices. We had we had pictures of the scene. We had we had the testimony of most of the protagonists. So we have the exact positions of where the guys were when they were shooting, when they were wounded, where they blew up a grenade.
Alfred Hitchcock believed the more successful the villain, the more successful the movie. Have you already got an idea on who could be your next Carlos? Maybe Bin Laden?
Well, I won't be doing Bin Laden. I've done Carlos. I've done my part of the job. It kind of stops there for me. But to me, it made sense to make a movie about Carlos because his background is the world I grew up in Paris, in London. I'm familiar with those places. I'm familiar with those people. I'm familiar with those times. I know how to write the dialogue for leftists of those times. It's a language I heard, and I understand the logic. I understand the dynamics of it. I understand how that generation moved from some kind of idealism to some kind of ideology, and then became pragmatic and eventually cynical. The story of Bin Laden, it's something else. It's not my culture. It's not my history. It's not something I would feel familiar with.
Could film serve as a means of counter-terrorism?
I think there is no terrorism as such. I think there's only state terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism. So I think in a film like Carlos, the only thing I can do, you know, with the feeble means of cinema and art, is to expose the notion that terrorism is always determined by geopolitics, that the terrorism is about one state sending a message to another, and usually you never know who is sending the message to whom. It only surfaces years later, but ultimately the truth is that it has no other meaning. And so, you know, I suppose that de-romanticizing terrorism is the best I can do.
Your award-winning drama Summer Hours was a box office hit in America and won accolades from film buffs and critics. Are you tempted by the bright lights of Hollywood?
You know, the bright lights of Hollywood are not that bright. You know, I've been able to make more or less the movies I wanted to make in Europe, and with, I think, certain degree of freedom, I would say with total freedom actually. And when you make movies, freedom is the most important part. I mean, it's the most important thing. It's not about the budget. It's not about the budget. It's about the ultimately Hollywood doesn't really give you that kind of freedom. It's big money. So because it's big money, you know, you have a lot of responsibility, and you have on your back a lot of people who think they know better than you and who are going to explain you how to make movies and so on and so forth. And it's I don't think it can be fun.